products for our company from a manufacturer where we produce by hand. And what we're trying to do is show people that a product is made, and because you can see that it is made, because the traces of the hand are still there, you are able to connect yourself to the product, and thus making the product more sustainable, because you don't want to lose the product. Disconnected the craftsmanship from the traditional designs, and I disconnected the know-how from the restoration, just offering the crafts and the know-how to new fields. And those new fields were in the very contemporary avant-garde part of the spectrum. And what we learned is that when you're able to reproduce a design of 200 years ago in the original way, and if you're able to do a restoration and finding to reproduce the exact same material which was used in a certain architectural project, then you have the same mentality, because you know things other companies don't know anymore, and you can do things that other companies cannot do anymore. And those skills are the same, which you need to do something that other companies cannot do yet. So you need the same skills, and you need the same mentality. So that was where design and art came into view, because it's what you learn is you use the same language. So when I speak to a restoration architect or to a curator of a museum of traditional pieces of like the Rijksmuseum, and he wants a certain piece to be restored, you speak in the same language in which you speak to Hella or Jurgen Beyer or Dick van Hoff or whoever, because it's all about sincerity and authenticity, which is an ugly word, but we haven't got any other. And it's about being really interested in making, and not as through modernism that the making is sort of it's not it's in the modernism the making should be anonymous, because it wasn't allowed that you could see that a product was made. It was designed, it had a certain philosophy, it was relevant, but how it was made is not very interesting. And what we're trying to do is show people that a product is made, and because you can see that it is made, because the traces of the hand are still there, you are able to connect yourself to the product, and thus making the product more sustainable, because you don't want to lose the product. So you can attach to a product. I mean, perfect products are everywhere. When you buy something from IKEA, it's perfect. So perfect is not very interesting. Every other option has been tried by arts and crafts manufacturers in the Netherlands, and they were not very successful. Another option is that you ask 10 people or 100 people, well, what kind of vase you would like, a red one or a brown one or a black or big? Said, okay, this is the type of vase most people would like. This is the one we're going to produce. That kind of thinking and developing and working is not something which is of any interest for us, because then I've told this before, then it's much better to send the design sketches to wherever, having it get in some containers, sell it to the department stores who are interested, than have this whole market thing. Well, this is not how I like to work, but we couldn't work this way. And if we would work this way in 10 or 20 years, this is like would work with Wedgwood, Vielreihenboch, Waterford, Crystal, all those big labels who just went cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and at the end of the day they fall off the table, there's nothing, and they go broke. So I think there's no other option. And I like this. Maybe there is another option, but I wouldn't like to do it in another way. That's the good part of my job. Yeah. Well, I think there are two very rational approaches that, which I briefly spoke to, is that we have a company. My task is to ensure continuation. That's one. Second thing is, what do I have to continue? What is the company? What is important? And then you start looking through the eyes of the stakeholders. So it's our employees, for one, shareholders, the village of Makkum, part of being the cultural identity of the country. So looking through the eyes of all those stakeholders, what would be the core asset to continue if I want to please them? And that's not money, and it's not. And even if it was money, I don't think it would be possible in the end. It's not the label, or the brand. I don't understand the whole concept of brands, and it's not the location. No, it's when I am able to continue the craftsmanship here in the village, and when I'm able to enlarge or continue the ceramic know-how, which I think is different. I mean, ceramic skills you can need for reproducing forever and ever something, and ceramic know-how means you continuously are open and curious and want to innovate, etc. When you have those pinpointed as your key assets, and you are able to continue those two, then and you succeed in that, then I think we have successfully continued the company, looking through the eyes of those four groups of stakeholders. So that's a very analytical way of thinking. So when you have those assets there and you say, okay, what can I do with the craftsmanship? I can design for myself products, but I'm not a designer. So no, we need something from outside. Then we can even more, I think, because he or she is strange with ceramics most of the times, or just a little bit, but I'm not very interested in potters. We did that. Then something can happen which could be of interest, and which it's, I thought. At the same time, I met two things happened. I met Hella, and we started to do the B set, and it gave me great fulfillment to understand. She was very new in the designing. She had a total different approach to design. She was not very much interested in a new form or a new shape or whatever. So we spoke each other's language, although I'm from a totally different background than she is, which gives you a feeling that, hey, there's something there that could grow. And the other thing that happened, that we were approached by Ettore Sotsas to reproduce colors, only 8 colors for a project in Singapore for tiles, which was very easy for us because we had developed very difficult, unstable glazes for restoration purposes, and he was asking 8 PMS codes. Can you reproduce that in a semi-matte finish? No big deal. 3 weeks it was ready. I flew to Milan. Yes, that's what I want. I have tried this with about 80 companies and nobody could do it. So I said, okay, when we can do this for the restoration field, there are contemporary architects who are interested in what we can do. So that's it. So it's two approaches. One is the analytical approach that, okay, this could be the field. The other one is a sort of confirmation by meeting Hella and being asked this question from a contemporary architect that led to a sort of feeling that, yes, this could be the right direction to move into. A normal day, no day is normal, but an average day could be that it's for me talking with people who are interested in collaboration, in a collaboration with us, mostly designers, sometimes artists, but mostly designers. Could be product designers, could be fashion designers, but more and more it's architects, thinking about materializing in a very preliminary stage of their sketches, of sketch designs, and telling them what the possibilities are and listening to them what they have in mind, which is not as solid. Most times it's not very solid. And then a dialogue starts, and I try to listen very carefully and make my interpretation, go to the laboratory and try to materialize in a sample what I think could be meant with the question. So I answer in samples and the questions come back. So that's what happens then when it's going right, and most of the times it's going in a good way, is that that's something that I show is not an answer to the question, but it's something that I add, or we add, which generates the next question, and that makes a very rich process, giving the end result having more quality. So we're not an editor. It's not like an architect or a designer comes to us and says, this is what I designed, or this is the material I want, this is the aesthetic look that I want. Would you be so kind to produce this for us? If that's the question, we're not the right manufacturer to go to. That's a question we get very often, but we don't want that. We tell them, well, you better go to a reproducing firm. We're not a reproducing firm. We are a co-creating firm. I thought in the beginning that when you do design, you are an art director, whatever that might be, but you're more in charge of, well, you're a sort of 50-50 partner, right? And in architecture, we're just enablers. We facilitate something and the architect knows exactly what he wants, which is not the case, I learned. So more and more we understand that you need the same skills and the same mentality and the same curiosity, whether you do product development or architectural collaborations. But with product development, when the product is there, a whole new world starts called sales and marketing, which we don't understand and we don't like. So that's the reason why architecture is more interesting. But you don't have the whole world. Well, you do have the whole world, but it's only the professionals where you work with. And as a small, we have to focus. I mean, we work with 55 people, so being international working, and in the design there's a lot about humbug about being there in Milan. I don't feel very comfortable. I like to work, do projects, and when you do your work right, then you have solved the project. In the case of Dick, it was a total different starting point, because what I was interested in is it possible to extend the type of products apart from bowls and dishes and vases in ceramics? What can we use ceramics for in different ways? So that was sort of the core of the briefing. So can you think of products produced of ceramics using our working ways of working, and not producing vases, bowls or archetypical things which you do in ceramics? So he thought about this question and came back and said, I can do that, but I have to add a second material. I said, okay, add a second material. So he added wood, and by adding wood he could answer this question by designing desk products like lamps and a box and a clock and a vase. But a vase is more or less a bucket like you see on the market. So that's an interesting dialogue. It's not only the dialogue between literally the making and the designing, but it's also about the briefing. Designing the briefing is, I think, maybe more than half of the whole project. And the better the briefing, the better designing process is. And where should you be specific about and where not? And so I didn't ask him to produce a lamp. I gave all this to him and think of something different than a vase of a bowl, using our techniques and skills. What would you think of? So it was a briefing of only 4 or 5 lines on paper, and that was it. And another case, when we had the flower pyramids, it was a briefing of 3 pages explaining why it's in the historical context, etc., etc. So that is something I learned very well. Well, very well. I learned because I had very critical designers who told me, like, Alison, this is our briefing. Think about it. Why should there be another vase? I mean, there are 100,000 vases. Why ask me to design a different vase? So that's a good question. So we never think of a market. Never. I'm not interested in the market. I think the value of the market is very overrated, and also from an economic point of view, in our manufacturing, working in a country where the wages are much higher than in China or wherever, if we would produce what the market was asking for, there's no reason for us to produce it here. So we have to do something that we think is important. We know much more about ceramics and culture and the designers we work with than the market. So that's how we work. So the market is not interested. When the product is there, we try to sell it, of course. But in the development of products, the market is not interesting. So with Dick, that was a very open question. And the second project we did with him was the tile stove, the wood-burning tile stoves. And that was very, that's actually sort of the same in line of the first project. I mean, tile stove, we do produce tile stoves. So, but we knew that in Austria and in Scandinavia there are stoves made of blocks like bricks, built, and then a house is built around it. So it's a very big, solid, heavy thing with a small fire burning and heating all the house. We didn't want that. But, and he had done the concrete stove, obviously. So it's a very technical thing for us. It's a very industrial thing, and he's a sort of a neo-functionalist. So I think so. He is very good at rethinking archetypical products and asking himself questions all the time. So and he had done the wood burning stove, and I wanted a wood burning stove. That was an easy briefing. Design a wood burning stove. So every project you have a different approach. So the wood burning stove was very obvious because it is a different thing for us to do in ceramics apart from bowls, etc. He had technical experience. How does a stove work? And it's a lot of research. So that was an easy thing. It wasn't an easy thing to produce it. That's a different thing. But in the briefing, it was an easy thing. So. There are different kinds of briefings and there are different kinds of approaches, but what I learned, that there has to be a mutual interest from the designer's point of view in how we work and what is important for us and why we do the things and what's the historical context. Not that they have to literally use the historical context, but they should be aware. And from our point of view, I want to know why a designer works like he or she does. What is driving him, and what is important for him or her, and then it's not so difficult to become soulmates because you share the same values. Yeah. Since we hadn't produced products for daily use, I mean, we produced products for daily use, but they are more ornamental pieces, but really products for daily use since like 1880, that could be a very interesting area to move into. So a more functional product. And with this in mind, Dick van Hof's name came up very clearly because, in our opinion, he is somebody who has the function very solidly incorporated in his design mentality. So we started a discussion with him, trying to formulate a briefing, and I was talking, and at some point he said, "Okay, Jan, so you just want us," because he's very simplistic, which is very cool. He said, "You want us or me to think of a function of ceramics beyond being a container, like a bowl or a vase or a plate, or etc." And said, "Okay, so let's write this down in a more solid way." We did that. So the question was, how can we incorporate ceramics for our company from a manufacturer where we produce by hand, how can we enlarge the functionality beyond the archetypical functions? And that was it. So we didn't ask him to make a series of products. We didn't ask him to make desk accessories. We didn't ask him to make anything. We just wanted to think of something which could broaden the functionality of ceramics. So he went to a studio, thought about it, came back, said, I have to add a second material. I said, okay, just do it. And so he came up with this. So he came up with, this was the first thing. So this actually is the reinterpretation of a very traditional library lamp, and a very archetypical thing. And he added this wood, which you can't do in ceramics. You could do it, but then it won't be adjustable. And this had a very nice appeal. And he said himself, well, this is what he likes best, because it makes you focused. When you have this lamp and you work on it, the only thing you can do is have a small book beneath it, or an A4 folio piece of paper beneath it. But that's not how we work. We use our whole desk. So from a functional point of view today, you need another lamp which is higher up, which has a broader beam of light. So this was the second one to come up. And then a whole series which is called Work appeared, adding a pen box and a clock. And eventually vase, because this wasn't the purpose of the whole project, but he said, I don't want the vase, Jan, I want a vase added, because the vase you have are all vases. And what I like best when I go to the flower shop, you have those buckets with tulips and with plants, and that's the way I like to see the flowers best. So I want to design a bucket. This is just a bucket with a hand thing. You can take this thing out, cut your flowers, put it back in, and use it. So it's very usable. It has a very it has an appeal that you clearly understand immediately what it's for. So it has a very nice button. He takes much care in defining those details. This is used in ships. It's like on the desk, it's sort of water resistant thing, but also these knobs. He's very specific about that, and that's what we like. So he has the same mentality from a designer's point of view as we have from a manufacturing point of view. Well, actually, the introduction of Hella and us didn't change much in the way to manufacture, because how we manufactured was a key asset from which I started to work with designers. So it's the other way around. It's not her asking us to produce in a different way. It was us asking her, this is how we work. How can you incorporate this way of working in a design? And of course she asked us, well, you do the glazing this way, but could you do the glazing this way? So minor change, but in the end, the way how, for instance, our painters, they work with certain brushes and they have a certain style of painting. And it's when a designer would ask, well, I want these painters to work with this block brushes and do this. I say, no, why? Well, this is how they work, and learn from them and give us the opportunity to learn from you, thus starting a dialogue, forming the product, which incorporates the skills in a brand new way. And so that's what we're doing. It's about when the process is right. We're not working to a certain endpoint. There's nothing in the end where we know we're going to go there. It's just open. Sometimes you start this way, you take a side path. Hey, the side path is of much more interest, and you go that way. So, but the key asset is the way we work, together with a curiosity and a will to make minor changes, of course. But the craftsmanship in the hands of our people is the key asset. And dear designer, make use of that. You can transform it, turn it around, do it a different way, but don't ask him to do a total different thing. So it's about knowing what not to change. This project started with a restoration, with a big job for the Rijksmuseum. They acquired 2 of those original pieces from 1690. So that was the end of the 17th century, the golden century of the Netherlands, where we ruled the world, we think. And those flower pyramids were sort of, in this Delft, were seen as generally seen as the most exuberant, exclusive luxury pieces ever produced. So the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, they acquired 2 of those, of which 2 segments were missing and the tops were missing. And they asked us, because we're the only factory still remaining using the original clay and using the tin glaze, etc. Are you willing and capable of reproducing those segments in a way that we cannot see the difference between the originals and the reproductions? Which sounds easier than it is, but although we have the technique, it's such a refined way, because it's an Eastern patterns, as you can see. So this clearly was started as copying of imported Chinese porcelain. It took us 1.5 years to find out how did they do this 320 years ago. And in the end we figured it out, and we could and they approved, thus producing in total 5 of those pieces and 2 top pieces. So that's this, after 1.5 years, here you are. So that then felt very good, because you knew you had worked so hard on something to acquire this technique. So I asked the director of the museum, will you allow us to make a reproduction of the original flower pyramid? And using that as a starting point for a contemporary project, asking the 4 designers at that time with whom I felt most comfortable with to make a contemporary answer in 2008. And he was very enthusiastic. So we went there and we took pictures, and we made the exact copy, and we produced this thing. And our Studio Job, Helle-Jan Gerius, Jurgen Bij, and Alexander van Zolbe, who actually is a fashion designer, to explaining why I think it's important. And the reason why I think it's important is not only to show to the people we are still capable of producing these exuberant pieces, of which nobody knows that it's still produced, possibly produced. Not only that, it's very interesting, because we didn't know that, but looking back, it was at the time just before the economic downfall, that it was a sort of, this was produced in 1690, 15 years later the Netherlands were just gone and past being taken over by Britain as the ruler of the world. So it was at the top of the decadence, actually, which was the same case some 3 years ago in the world. So there's a sort of a parallel. And so we defined what was that. The only thing was make as much use of our capabilities as you can, make it as difficult as possible, because we want to show what we are capable of. Help us develop the craftsmanship to a next level. And the only thing further was it should be having the same proportions approximately than the original. For him it was most difficult, being a fashion designer, so he approached it as seeing a dress of a woman as the, I don't know the right word, the covering of the body. He sort of said this is also needed by a woman to cover herself up. This is what she needs. It is a dressing table. That's the conceptual starting point. So this is a Rietveld stool in ceramics, which is very difficult to produce. This is a box in which his pearls, which are in our collection, the Pearls of Makkum. It's porcelain pearls. It's an interpretation of a pearl necklace. This is a stool. This is the mirror. This is where you have your bijoux in. This is the thing where you have your needles in. I don't know how you call them in English. This is your powder, which has Dutch Makkum powder clay, so the same clay for your powder mask. And this is your perfume and the crowning on top with a small mirror in between. And the 3 basic instruments like earth, water and air or is gold. It's the 3 elements. And for the rest, it's just a very archetypical low bourgeois theme, like living in a flat, having a pot of this typical Dutch with a Melita filter thing on top, and a Brabantia, that's the make boiling kettle, which every household in the Netherlands had. So it's a very, and Daddy is smoking his pipe. So it's a very, very changing of the very ordinary life to something very exuberant. She was really thinking, well, what can I do? The product is there, it's beautiful. Actually, it's the most beautiful thing in this field. So I cannot add anything. I just want to what I can do is taking away things. And this is also a story about vanishing of craftsmanship. So it starts in a smaller version with the pot here, losing its decoration here, losing sprouts here and there, and eventually losing material over here. So it's a very sad story, and at the same time she totally changed its function from being a stack of segments to a solid bowl with an ear which is hung on the wall in a very just ordinary way, taking away its function and taking away its luxury. Okay, these are 4 buckets, and a bucket is a container, but a bucket is also about collecting. So he has various conceptual starting points. One is, for instance, that it's about a collector's item, but it's also an item that collects. So it's an item that collects ears or sprouts or other things. It's also about a bucket being a container, but also a bucket being an instrument to clean. So in German, schön, the word schön means clean, but also means beautiful. So in his opinion, cleaning is very close to beauty, and he wants to show that. So you need cleaning buckets over here, but also collecting about the silhouettes of all the people who have been working on this project from us and from his studio. Silhouettes of those. Inside, it's a collection of different products from our collection. He has added silver rings, and you can stack those 4 buckets in a very delicate way to each other in such a way that you think this can't be possible. What we are into now already, I mean, the big transition is done already, and I think the adjustments now which we are making is that we go more into projects with professionals and not as much in the consumer market. And that could be anything where our specific skills or mentality or know-how is required. And we are building up now a sort of reputation that we are being recognized by those people, but we are a long way from where we are. So we need a little bit of growth from an economic perspective also. And it will be more international. Yeah, it certainly will be more international.